It all started with a sound, a whisper carried by the wind, a heartbeat lost in time. Claire Randall never meant to fall through the centuries. One step through the standing stones of Craigna, done, and everything she knew vanished. The world around her changed. No cars, no lights, no modern noise. Only the rustle of trees, the crackle of torches, and the echo of bagpipes deep in the mist. In that haunting silence, she wasn't just lost. She was reborn. And in the wild heart of the Scottish Highlands, fate waited in the form of a man named Jamie Fraser. The day began like any other. Yet destiny was quietly moving beneath Claire's feet. A nurse from the Second World War, she had seen blood, pain, and the fragile balance of life. She longed for peace, for normal days, for laughter with her husband, Frank. But peace has its own strange ways of testing those who crave it most. When Claire touched those ancient stones, she didn't know they were pulsing with power, the kind of magic that doesn't ask for permission. Only obedience. In a single heartbeat, the air around her shifted. The sound of distant gunfire from her time faded, replaced by galloping horses and the clash of steel. Her pulse quickened. The smell of smoke and heather filled her lungs. She was still in Scotland, but not the one she knew. The roads were gone. The people dressed differently. The world itself felt raw and untamed. Panic took over at first. She ran through the forest branches, scratching her arms, calling out for Frank, but no voice answered. Then came the soldiers, shouting in a language familiar yet foreign, their muskets raised. Confusion turned to terror. And before she could understand what was happening, she was pulled into a whirlwind of 18th century conflict, a stranger caught between warring clans. Every sense screamed that this couldn't be real. Yet the cold, the fear, the heartbeat in her ears, all of it was painfully real. She had fallen into another world, one written long before her time. And as she stumbled through that chaos, she didn't know she was walking straight toward the man who would change her life forever. Jamie Fraser. Through the smoke and shouts of men, Claire's heart pounded like a drum. She had no weapon, no plan, and no idea which side she was on. The forest around her flickered with torchlight, and the echo of hooves grew louder. Then, out of the shadows, they came rough men in kilts, armed and wary. Their voices were sharp, their words thick with an accent she could barely understand. Every instinct told her to run, but her body refused. One man stepped forward, tall, broad, with fiery hair that caught the moonlight. His face was stern but not cruel. He looked at her like he was seeing a ghost. The others called him Jamie. And in that moment, something quiet stirred between them. Not love, not yet. But a strange recognition. Jamie was hurt, blood staining his shoulder, pain hidden behind his steady eyes. Claire's training took over before fear could. She didn't think, she just moved. Tearing a strip of fabric, she pressed it against his wound, her hands trembling. The Highlanders watched in silence, half suspicious, half amazed at this strange woman who treated a soldier like a patient instead of an enemy. Jamie winced but didn't pull away. Their eyes met, his filled with curiosity, hers with disbelief. The world around them blurred for a heartbeat. She didn't know who he was or where she truly was, but something about him felt safe. He said little, only a soft, "Thank tha." But his voice carried warmth. She hadn't felt since leaving her own time, as they rode through the dark woods later that night. Claire sat behind him on the horse, her hands gripping his waist for balance. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palms, the smell of pine, the cold air, the sound of his voice giving orders to the others. All of it carved itself into her memory. She didn't know why, but she knew this moment mattered. Some meetings happen by chance. Others are written long before we're born. And as the stars watched over them, the universe quietly began to weave the love story that would outlast centuries. The fire crackled softly as the Highlanders gathered in a small stone cottage, their shadows dancing against the walls. Outside, the wind howled through the glen, but inside, the air was thick with tension. Claire knelt beside Jamie, his shirt torn, his shoulder bleeding from the earlier fight. The smell of whiskey, smoke, and earth filled the room. She didn't belong there yet, somehow. She was the only one who could help. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, though her mind raced in disbelief. She'd stitched wounds in war zones, but never in a place like this. No antiseptic, no clean bandages, only torn fabric, a flask of whiskey, and her will to keep him alive. Jamie watched her carefully, his blue eyes filled not with fear, but with fascination. Every time she spoke, her words sounded foreign to him, yet he listened. Mesmerized by her calm in a world that made no sense. When she told him to sit still, he obeyed without hesitation. "You've done this before," he said softly, wincing as the needle pierced his skin. She nodded, whispering more times than I can count. Their voices blended with the fire's crackle, a fragile harmony between two strangers bound by pain and destiny. As she worked, something in the room shifted. The soldiers who once saw her as a strange intruder now looked at her with respect, even awe. She wasn't just a woman from nowhere. She was a healer, fearless and determined. And Jamie, with every glance, seemed to see her not as a mystery to solve, but as a miracle that had simply appeared when he needed her most. When she finished stitching, she carefully wrapped his shoulder. Her fingers brushed against his skin. A fleeting touch, yet charged with something powerful. For a moment, neither spoke. The firelight painted his face in gold, and her eyes lingered a second too long. "Thank thee, Sassenach," Jamie murmured, using the Scottish word for Outlander. Was meant to mark her as different. But the way he said it made it sound almost tender. She didn't know whether to be offended or moved. Maybe both. That night, long after the others slept, Claire lay awake, listening to the sounds of the wild beyond the walls, the crack of the wind, the soft snore of the men, and somewhere nearby, Jamie's steady breathing. She told herself it was just exhaustion, just the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. But deep down, she knew something had begun that neither time nor distance could ever undo. Asterisk morning crept softly through the mist, brushing the highlands with gold. The night's chaos had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of dawn. Claire awoke to the crackle of fire and the scent of wet earth. For a moment, she forgot where she was until she saw Jamie sitting near the flames. His injured arm now wrapped neatly in the bandage she'd tied. He looked different in the daylight, calmer, younger, his eyes catching the sunrise like the reflection of a hidden flame. He turned toward her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "The sleep sound as a bairn," he said, his voice rough but kind. She smiled back, unsure whether to laugh or cry. It felt impossible. Just yesterday she was in 1945. And now she was here in a century that wasn't hers, sitting beside a man whose very presence made her heart ache in ways she couldn't explain. As they rode together later that day, the silence between them wasn't awkward, it was alive. Every shared glance, every quiet word seemed to mean something more. Jamie would occasionally look back to make sure she was still on her horse, and each time their eyes met, the world felt still, as if even time itself was watching them. She told herself it was gratitude, perhaps friendship, but deep down, something far stronger was stirring. When they stopped to rest, Claire found herself studying him. The way his laughter came easily, despite the scars he carried. The way he listened to her stories, even though her words were from a future he couldn't imagine. He didn't treat her as strange, he treated her as if she belonged. And that frightened her more than the time travel itself. As the sun dipped behind the hills, the colors of twilight wrapped around them. The world felt suspended, like it was holding its breath. Jamie caught her gaze and said softly, "The dinner looked like any woman I've ever seen." She tried to answer, but no words came, only the rush of her heartbeat, loud enough to drown out the wind. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something older, deeper, a connection that felt written into the fabric of the universe. Something beyond reason, beyond time. As they rode into the fading light, Claire knew she was standing at the edge of something she could never undo. In another life, they might have passed each other by, two souls from different centuries, never meant to meet. But fate had other plans. The spark had been lit, and nothing, not time, not war, not destiny itself could put it out. The Highlands stretched endlessly before them, wild and untamed, like the story just beginning to unfold. Days passed, yet time felt suspended between them. Claire tried to fight the pull, that quiet force drawing her closer to Jamie with every heartbeat. She reminded herself that she was married, that her life, her husband, and her world existed centuries ahead. But the more she tried to remember, the more the past began to feel like a fading dream. Jamie, too, seemed to wrestle with something unseen. He wasn't a man of many words, but every glance told 1,000 stories. When he spoke to her, it wasn't just conversation, it was connection. It was trust being built in the middle of danger and chaos. In his presence, she didn't feel like an outlander anymore. She felt seen, understood, anchored. One night, as thunder rolled across the mountains, they took shelter in an abandoned cabin. Rain hammered the roof while the fire flickered weakly between them. Claire sat wrapped in a blanket, watching the flames dance across Jamie's face. He told her stories of his childhood, of his home, his family, the losses that carved him into who he was. There was sorrow in his voice, but also strength. When he looked at her, there was something unspoken in his eyes, as if he sensed their fates were already tied together. Though neither could explain how, Claire felt the weight of time pressing down on her. Every moment she spent here pulled her further from the life she once knew. But in that same space, she found something unexpected: purpose, belonging, and a feeling that defied logic. Maybe the stones hadn't trapped her. Maybe they delivered her where she was always meant to be. As lightning lit the room, Jamie reached out, gently brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. The world outside roared, yet between them, silence reigned, soft, steady, and inevitable. It wasn't the silence of strangers. It was the silence of destiny recognizing itself. Neither spoke of what they felt. They didn't have to. The fire said it for them, the storm echoed it to souls caught between centuries, bound by something far greater than time. And though neither could see what lay ahead, the battles, the heartbreak, the years that would tear them apart, destiny had already decided. This was only the beginning of a love that would echo through lifetimes. Time is a thief silent, merciless, and unrelenting. It steals faces, memories, and moments, but some bonds defy its grasp. Years would pass, battles would be fought, and oceans of pain would separate them. Yet even across centuries, their hearts remembered. The sound of his voice, the warmth of her touch, those were echoes that time could never silence. When Claire and Jamie were torn apart, it wasn't the end. It was only another test of what fate had written long before they met. Each sunrise that found them apart still carried the other's name in its light. Each heartbeat whispered the same truth: they would find each other again. And when they finally did, the world stood still. No words, no explanations, just two souls colliding like they had the first time. The same fire, the same recognition, the same sense that the universe had bent its rules just to bring them back together. She wasn't the same woman who fell through the stones, and he wasn't the same man she'd first healed by the fire. They had lived lifetimes of pain and hope, yet the love between them remained untouched, fierce and eternal. As they stood together once more, the past and future blurred. The years apart melted away like mist in morning light. There were lines on their faces now, scars where time had left its mark, but their hearts still beat in rhythm, as if no time had passed at all. Jamie looked at her the way he did that first night, with awe, with devotion, with quiet certainty. And Claire, for all her doubts and questions, knew she had found home again. Not a place, not a time, but a person. The story of Claire and Jamie wasn't about magic or time travel. It was about something far greater, the way two souls can find each other again and again, no matter how the world changes. It was about the courage to love beyond logic, to fight for something that doesn't make sense, but feels more real than anything else ever could. And as the wind carried through the stones once more, it whispered the truth that started it all. This is where it began, and where it will begin again. 'Cause love like theirs doesn't end. It echoes endlessly. Through time, every great love story has a beginning, a single moment when two lives collide. and nothing is ever the same again. For Claire and Jamie, that moment wasn't written in a letter or carved in stone. It was written in the beating of two hearts that somehow recognized each other across centuries. It began with confusion, with fear, with a wound and a helping hand. But from that spark grew a love that defied every rule of time and reason. A nurse from the future and a warrior from the past, bound by something stronger than the laws of the universe itself. Their love endured separation, loss, and the ache of years spent apart. Yet it survived not because of magic, but because it was real. Because when two souls are meant for each other, even time must step aside. So when we look back on that night in the Highlands, the firelight flickering, the soft exchange of a glance, a whispered Sassenach, we're reminded that destiny doesn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it begins quietly, with a single touch, and echoes forever.